For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber for instant analysis of USC's Tuesday practice of Cal Week. The Trojans return to Howard Jones Field in full pads. I think the first time we've seen USC in full pads in November for a while. But Dan, what do you think of today's practice?
Well, you can tell when you're coming off a win. It's so much better. Everything is better. Everything is upbeat. You know, they might have had a bunch of guys injured and a few really key players they're not certain about this week and all of that. But when you're coming off a win and you've done some things well, it almost doesn't matter who you played. You know, if the offensive line coach can say, I think all 5 of our guys played pretty well. That was pretty. There's just that. You could just tell if you didn't know how things went last weekend, just dropped in, you would have been able to tell this team must have won last weekend. So there's that kind of positivity. We're going to be able to, replace Michael Pittman if we have to. We're going to be able to replace Stephen Carr if we have to. We're going to be able to replace Biggie Marshall if we have to. Somebody, some way we'll work it out. And so that was kind of the theme of today, kind of this positivity of coming off a win. Plus, I guess they probably all read the stories about they could still end up, in the Pac-12 championship game, Pac-12 South. They could end up in the darn Rose Bowl. I mean, so you kind of like, ooh, man, you're the guy on the gallows and the trapdoor wouldn't open and they decided to let you go or something. I mean, they're walking free.
Yeah. Well, today was the first day we got to talk to Tim Drevno after a game as he's taken over as offensive line coach. And it was an interesting juxtaposition from Neil Callaway. We couldn't get a lot of answers from Neil whenever we asked, but having Tim Drevno, a positive voice for that position group, and actually give some interesting answers, some informative answers, was a nice change of pace.
He likes talking to us. I don't think there's any question about it. I think he does a lot of talking to his kids, and I think there's a contrast there. I mean, Callaway was as old school as it comes, and I think Drevno can not only explain things to us, but maybe to them. And he had a good story. I mean, let's face it, if you were going to change and become an offensive coach at USC, as the play caller, as Clay was, or as the offensive line coach, the week you'd want to do it is the Oregon State week. I mean, so that's being smart about it. But yeah, he's fun to talk to. He says some things a little differently, and he had some good things to talk about. And so everybody's. The key is how do you keep it going this week? Yeah. And now you step up into a much more challenging defense. It's a Cal defense that can do so many different things, and that's the challenge. And how does he do it? And he talked about, I think he really did understand that last week was last week. All you do with last week's game is build on it. You have to build on it and let it take you somewhere. So we shall see how that works out against a Cal defense that really makes you communicate, really makes you talk to one another, really makes you recognize all the changes that they give you one look and change to another look. That has not been a strong point for this USC offensive line. Yeah. Recognizing things, changing on the fly. But, they're coming off where they all graded out well this week. So is that the kind of thing that focuses you and locks you in and has you in a place where you can do it, where you got to get better, but you do get better this week? We'll see.
Yeah. As far as defensive coverages, disguising coverages, fronts, JT Daniels and Brian Ellis were also asked about that too, not just the O-line. How do you recognize those coverages? How do you get out of those difficult challenges? What do they have to say?
Well, I think that was one of the themes of for Brian Ellis was JT, who's been so ahead of the game his whole life, and so, things came fairly easily. Even though JT really works hard at it, things kind of have come easily. He's been in a great place with a great program, and they blocked everybody at Mater Dei, and they were better than everybody they played. And so now, somebody asked JT, said, Coach Ellis was giving you really, great props for being a freshman and working as hard as you do and being the hardest working guy. And he said, and he kind of asked JT about how did you get there? Why are you that way? And he said, well, frankly, I'm not as good as Sam Darnold. Yeah. He's better than me. I have to work harder. And he said, I'm not very tall either. And it was just like, for me to succeed, I've got to really prepare well. So it'll be interesting. He was talking about Coach Wilcox's defense, and he said, I love his defense, and he's just, it's a magnificent, defensive coach and all that. So, JT, when you ask him, and I guess the other thing I said about JT is he's like a coach. I mean, he approaches this kind of the way a coach does. And I guess Clay even talked about that, where he can shake things off, and you got 24 hours, and then you move on, and you clean the slate. And that's what JT does pretty well. Now, is he ready? As far as Brian Ellis said, the big difference for him is learning how quickly the defensive lineman can get to you, how that's so different from high school.
Yeah.
And it's by far, the biggest adjustment for him is that quickness, that suddenness of what a defense can do to you.
Yeah. As far as the cornerback situation goes, we saw some interesting things today. Jonathan Lockett was the first-team cornerback, and then we also saw some Raymond Scott in there, the linebacker. He got some reps. It's just they're throwing people in there. Dominique Davis got reps as well. Helton says that they have a best-case and worst-case scenario. He joked he'll see who's alive on Friday to make that call. But right now it looks a little bit dire as far as Iman Marshall goes. Helton said that Iman told him, Clay Helton, he wants to play, but they're going to do him right and do what the doctors say. So it's still TBD on Iman Marshall, but pretty dire straits there.
Well, the additional piece of information on Iman was that not just an ankle sprain, but a foot sprain.
Yeah.
And I was thinking when he walked in last night, or Saturday night, that it looked like it was as much a foot sprain as an ankle sprain on the inside. So, he was out walking around on it. He got it taped up pretty well. So we'll see. I mean, Elijah Griffin is back. Now I know he was back a little bit last week, and then his shoulder was real sore. He ended up with practice finishing interception again, like he likes to do.
Yeah.
And so he'll play into the into the mix. I don't think they're going to probably think about using as much nickel. I think they're going to have a more. And Cal's the kind of team I think you can do this. Is play more the standard 4 defensive backs and not feel like you always have to have, that 5th DB on the field, although you're going to have both nickel guys right now in the package, both of them, one starting at corner and one starting at safety. So when you have both of your nickel guys starting at other positions, you may not want to even think about running a nickel.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as other injuries go, Stephen Carr and Michael Pittman are not likely. Stephen Carr more so not likely than Michael Pittman, but Helton said they'll find out later in the week as far as Pitt goes. But Helton did say that they're going to move Amon-Ra, St. Brown, mainly to the outside, Velus Jones in that slot position. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, so they don't even have to move Devin into the first group, and they could still use him the way they did at Oregon State. I was surprised watching Michael Pittman looking like he's not in any kind of discomfort, and certainly moving both his arms and all of that. There might be, maybe there's a little bit more to it than what we know with the muscle or the bone bruise and fluid underneath.
Yeah.
And they may have already made the decision that they just don't want to take a chance because of what they're seeing. But I was surprised that, he was catching the ball for the quarterbacks and moving both. I was trying to figure out, do we know for absolute certain which one it is? And when you watched him move his arms and his shoulders, you couldn't really tell. So
Sort of.
I don't know. I don't know where he stands. I would think they would really like not to have to use him this week. And so I think that would be the ideal scenario. And they've got a lot of receivers still.
Sure, yeah.
They still got guys. You saw more of Joshua Mater-Baby. You saw, Pi Young made a big play. You saw, Trevon Sidney. They've got a lot of guys.
Yeah, they should be able to use that depth there. But any final thoughts before we wrap it up on a Tuesday, an election Tuesday?
No, I think this is kind of a classic. Daylight savings is over. Practice is more in the dark than not in the sunlight. You're not staring at the sunlight. It has a different. Once you get to this week, you realize you're really on the downslide of the season, and it's kind of this. Most teams are kind of defined by now as to where they're going and what they're doing and all that. I think the interesting thing now is being part of this just wacko Pac-12 is nobody has any idea where anybody's going, what they're going to do, what's going to be involved. It's kind of one of those, gee, I have no idea. I mean, when you can think of, it could end up in the Las Vegas Bowl or maybe the Rose Bowl. It's like, and there's 2 more games left, and that's all. As far as the Pac-12, you think, this is crazy. There is no way that you should have choices. I mean, when they show you that it's mathematically possible to have a 6-way tie for first in the Pac-12 or last at 5-4 or 4-5, it's just unbelievable. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. So, who knows what to think?
Who knows, indeed. But that's going to wrap it up for a Tuesday practice of Cal Week. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.